Hi everyone, here's the book chemist once again. Today I'm reviewing Pnin by Vladimir Nabokov. Pnin? I swear nobody ever cares about what I'm reading, but in the week where I was reading this book, at least 4 people asked me in real life what I was currently reading, and that always led to 5 minutes of confused conversation like, what? Pnin? No? What's that? Nah? But I guess it's funny because it's a recurring joke in the novel that all the characters, all the American characters in the book cannot really pronounce the name of this Russian emigre who moved to the United States, escaping revolution, teaches at a small American college and is pining, constantly pining after his motherland and after the life he left behind throughout his adventurous and tragic existence. That's a very bad introduction to the book though. The word tragic is there for a reason, but what the book is, first and foremost, is hilariously, uproariously funny. This is possibly the funniest college novel I've ever read. College novels and novels trying to capture the life of universities are an especially popular subgenre in the 20th century, in recent decades. So many writers in the last 50 plus years have had to sustain themselves and to get a living teaching at colleges and getting first-hand experiences of life there while they also dedicated themselves to the craft of writing. Giles Goatboy by John Barth has been at the top of my list for a very long time. You always read criticism about people like Jonathan Franzen, people like Zadie Smith, who write about college life but don't maybe have the greatest experience, direct experience of it, getting it completely wrong, thinking of colleges as these bizarre places where the staff engages in constant marijuana parties and debauchery. That hasn't been my experience of English departments at all. Pnin captures what it feels like to work at a university, to be in the staff of a university brilliantly. The backstabbing, the bizarre power games going on at all times, all of the complete bullshit that has nothing to do whatsoever with the subjects you're teaching and researching, with the stuff you supposedly live for, but that sometimes sounds like it takes up 90% of your time working at a university. Some of the passages in here about the life in the college are just so brilliantly hilarious, mostly because they're true. The fact that after a certain while, and actually pretty soon, if you work at a university, you stop noticing the students, even though supposedly they are the reason why the place exists. You just kind of stop seeing them around. Or the fact that sometimes the heads of a given department seem to be the people who are least knowledgeable about their subject. The head of the French department in here kind of doesn't speak French at all. If you're interested in the subgenre of the campus novel, I highly recommend you check out Pnin. The other reason why everybody should read it is the exuberance of its language. This is possibly the most deceptive short novel I've ever encountered, because look at it. It looks like it takes an hour to go through this book. It took me an entire week, and I was so engaged in it that I was reading it I would say probably an hour a day more. Who cares? It took me a long time, mostly because the language is so dense, it's so well curated and so explosive and baroque, and does so many interesting things and takes off in all possible lexical directions and includes all kinds of specific terminology from all walks of life, that I just had to reread most sentences a couple of times to get through, but not in a bad way. Sometimes that can be hell, it can be death to go through one of those novels where you just can't turn the page because you don't understand what's going on. Here it's the very opposite. You are stimulated and you just want to get every nuance of Nabokov's brilliant language, so that sure, you proceed slowly, but you enjoy the book so much more for that. It's not a slog. If anything, you kind of wish that it would carry on even further, and that you could spend even more time standing by Pnin's side and enjoying his paradoxical and controversial takes on American life and learning more about his life and his experience. I filmed a video some years ago about a few writers, few famous canonical writers that I didn't really enjoy, and I listed Nabokov in that video after my reading of Lolita. But after several years later, I read Pale Fire, which is one of the most beautiful and amazing novels I've read in my life. And now I love Pnin so much that, number one, I think Nabokov is slowly but steadily becoming one of my favorite writers. And number two, I definitely have to reread Lolita. I think it might have been a case of reading it too early, both in terms of my life experience and my experience as a reader, and in terms of my experience with the English language. I do believe that because of the extent of Nabokov's language skills and of the way it just turns the English language into this beautiful tool to create these vivid pictures of the human experience, I think it was probably too soon in my journey through English to approach such a brilliant novel. And I'll be rereading it hopefully soon, and I also want to check out everything else he's written. For whatever reason, until recently, I had this very stupid conviction that Nabokov had only written a handful, maybe 5-6 novels. No, apparently he has an immense canon, an immense oeuvre out there for me to explore, and that's brilliant. I'm really glad of it. If it were just a very funny campus novel, if it were just an exploration of a very peculiar character, if it were a book about the difficulties of adapting to life in a foreign country and immersing yourself in a culture that sometimes seems so alien to yours, and you end up looking for traces of the familiar everywhere, but when you find them they inevitably break your heart because they remind you of what you left behind, which, as somebody who's not living in their home country but who really likes their homeland, like myself, I could appreciate a lot in the book. If it was just about all this, it would still be a masterpiece. What turns Pnin into something even more beautiful are the very brief moments of deep tragedy, and again that word I think is important, that you find across the book. The moments where the laughter stops and Pnin, the narrator, the character, the book, reflects on the horrors of the 20th century, on the horrors that moved this character in a way to the other side of the world, that forced him to leave all of his life behind. Where the book stops and thinks about all this, those are truly heartbreaking and blood-chilling and arresting moments. I'm at a loss for words because, again, blood-chilling feels a bit cliched, feels a bit telegraphed. A thriller could be blood-chilling. Pnin connects itself with some of the great questions of life, with this idea of how do you possibly carry on living in a world with a history that's so devastating and so traumatic and troubling that even just contemplating it almost destroys the whole purpose of existence, especially for somebody like this protagonist, who spends his life researching narratives and stories that are very relevant to him, but that seem almost to disappear, to become of no import whatsoever in the face of such historical crimes. It deals with the heaviest possible themes and does so only briefly, but the brevity of it is part of that reflection. In that sense, it reminded me a lot of Catch-22, which is another novel that is incredibly funny until it isn't, although these are admittedly very different books on any other possible front. I don't want to end the review on a sad note, because Pnin is, after all, just a hilarious book. It's such a wistful, such a bittersweet experience, but I think you'll remember the laughs you'll have with it long after you finish it, just as you'll remember those strong pages that are honestly among the most beautiful. There are a couple of pages here in the closure of a chapter that are, and I kid you not, among the most beautiful lines of prose I've ever read. I really love Pnin. I think it's a masterpiece. I highly recommend to any passionate reader, and of course to any Nabokov fan who probably already has read Pnin. year, long before I came along and recommended it. What did you think of Pnin? How are you supposed to pronounce it? Let me know in the comment section below. And thank you as always for watching the review, guys. Bye, guys.